What's going on, everybody? It's SJG. Welcome to HBCU Game Day. I'll give folks a second to hop on live. We are streaming not only from YouTube but also from my Twitter. Um, but we would prefer everybody to hop on from YouTube for sure. We can always use that revenue and those clicks and all of that good stuff. So appreciate everybody that does that. If you are on YouTube, please do me a favor early on and go ahead and subscribe. I'm sorry, go ahead and like the video first of all. If you haven't subscribed, do that, but definitely like the video and let me know who you're representing, who your HBCU is, or what HBCU you're pulling for. Now that we're in March, and not all of us have games to play. If you don't know, I am Stephen J. Gaither, HBCU Game Day founder, and I'm in Norfolk, Virginia for the MEAC Basketball Tournament 2024. Just finished up a long, and I do mean long, a long day of action yesterday. Drove up from North Carolina. The private jet was out of commission. I'm joking. I drove up from North Carolina and was able to catch working on the news, bringing you guys the news, and we see that Hampton University has a new head basketball coach. A lot of things are going on. Then we got to the Scope Arena in time for the men's action yesterday, and we'll talk a little bit more about that late night. But I'm here, not quite bright-eyed and bushy-tailed, but it's it's noontime. Actually, our game's going on right now. Coppin State University is playing Maryland Eastern Shore. There's a battle going on there. Of course, Norfolk State and Howard both advanced on yesterday. So, there's that. Good for them. They will both be in on the semifinals day, which is always a good for the MEAC when Norfolk State is there. So, I will go ahead and. Okay, Mr. Body. Okay, we see you. We see you. That's what's up. If you guys appreciate everybody that's on the YouTube channel for sure. If you're on the YouTube channel, you have a question, send us that super chat, and we'll definitely make sure we ask your question. Just help support the channel. Driving up to Norfolk ain't free, but all good. Appreciate you guys. But before we get into any more about the tournaments, we've got a very special guest. I've been wanting to have this discussion with her for quite a while. A little bit off the beaten path for not only us, but I think also folks who cover HBCUs in media. And, one of there is an HBCU. There are a couple of HBCUs actually who have multiple teams that are competing for a national title as of right now. There's Langston University in Langston, Oklahoma. And there is also this university, West Virginia State University, which is, one of the two HBCUs that are majority white in population, so in enrollment. So, but we wanted to learn a little bit more about West Virginia State and its culture. And, who better than one of their own alumni? Yeah, man, HBCU pass. I'm working with what I got, man. Shout out to my hotel. They had a little lighter here, and we're gonna make it shine, So we'll make it work. But in the meantime, we got Miss Baigen Seawell. She is a proud West Virginia State University graduate. I'm gonna bring her on. We'll talk a little bit with her and find out a little bit more about West Virginia State. Miss Seawell, how are you doing?
I'm pretty good. How are you?
I'm doing great, doing great. I appreciate you for hopping on here in the midday with me. I know not only are you doing your everyday thing, but also you got some rooting interest in the game that's going on down the road at the Scope. Just tell us, just talk to us, introduce us to yourself, who you are, and then how you got to West Virginia State University.
So, my name is Baigen Seawell. I am a proud alumna of West Virginia State University, the illustrious, as we like to call it in passing. I have graduated in 2019, so right before COVID. So I got to get like the fun stuff out before everything kind of changed as far as like school and the experience goes. But like when I had started my journey, I think just in general for school, I want to say that I knew that I wanted to work in sports, and so that was always been my thing. I've always talked about sports in some capacity. I was always like debating with the guys about anything humanly possible, sports related, and I was very like adamant about that. So I think that kind of spearheaded me to kind of stay in that realm. I was already an athlete in high school. I had played basketball and I ran track. I stuck more to track than basketball, and I eventually still stayed with basketball, just in a different way. I was more so on the what was eventually going to be the social media manager side of things. So I kind of like managed their Twitter, started up like all of those things, and I didn't really know what I wanted to do when I got to college. So my mom kind of helped me. She told me for every PWI I visited, she wanted me to also visit an HBCU. So when I went to Western Kentucky for a journalism camp, she wanted me to look at Tennessee State. When I was looking at schools in Georgia, because I'm from Georgia, she made sure that I checked like also Clark Atlanta. She didn't really want me to check out Spelman that much. That's her personal preference. She wanted me to kind of like more so look at other schools, but she definitely wanted me to look at the schools that had the programs that I was looking for. So when I went to Mercer and UGA, she kind of mentioned like, hey, look at Fort Valley. That's like not in the same area, but still look. Look at Clark Atlanta since you're also looking at Georgia State. So I did all those things. And all the schools were really appealing to me. She also went to Howard, so she had me go to Howard homecoming. Not the greatest time to check and look at the school when there's all this fun stuff going on. So I expected every single HBCU to be like that. And then I realized, going on visits and stuff that it's not like this 24/7. So I visited around like 5 or 6 HBCUs, and then my mentor, who I call my aunt at this point, and she's also my soror, so shout out to all the Reds out there. She basically told me about state when I was like in the 8th grade. I wasn't thinking about school at that time. And fast forward to I think my junior year, I still hadn't really set on a school yet. And I was like, okay, well, let me check out this school because I've looked at all these schools. I've been accepted to like 4 or 5. I just want to try one more. We looked and we went up there. It was raining. It was absolutely terrible the day we went. I think it was April. And I want to say got there at like 9 in the morning, went on the tour. It was a really small campus. It was super quiet. I think it's because it was raining. Super quiet, very cold and dreary, not what I'm used to. But I was definitely interested in like what they had to offer, especially like from the smaller class size. It was in a quieter area versus all of like the city schools and like the larger like campuses that I've seen. So that was a thing that really stood out. But there was one specific thing, which was one of my friends now that I'm really close to. She was my tour guide. She was like literally walking in the rain, didn't have a raincoat or anything, no like whatever. Somebody literally drove up to her and gave her this umbrella. It was like, bro, like you can't be in the rain like that here. And I was like, oh, it's like super family oriented here. So fast forward a little farther down the tour and she starts talking about Earl Lloyd. I personally did not know about him until I got to state and specifically on that day, which I found out was his birthday, which was April 3rd. And I was like, it's interesting because like I'm just really into sports and sports history and I didn't know that beforehand. But I was very like enamored by that. And then she started talking about Wendell Smith and all of these other things. And I'm like, I know I want to be in sports media and I know I want to work in sports journalism. So this is interesting because he was following Jackie Robinson around and doing all of this stuff that a lot of Black journalists probably weren't able to do or were like starting to butt into. So it was really cool to me. And I think that stood out. I got to like tour other stuff like the studio and everything. And so like I got to really like experience everything that it was to offer. And, down the line, I just became more and more in love with the school. I was already accepted, so it was fine. But they also gave me scholarship money, which was also fine. And then having like a really big support system with the alumni chapter. State has a really big alumni base in Atlanta, so they were like really gunning for me to go. And when I got there, I like hit the ground running. I did all of the things. I was involved like from the point I got there. I started working in admissions, so I'm really great with talking to people and convincing people to get there. And I got a lot of students to be there, and it was super fun. Outside of that, I was able to join a Greek letter organization my junior year. I joined the devastating chapter, Alpha Delta chapter of Delta Sigma Theta Sorority Incorporated. And then I also was super involved in SGA. I was student government vice president. Then I became the board of governors student rep. So involved on that side. And then in my actual field of interest and study, I was a sportscaster. I did not know at the time, but my teachers and my professors and my mentors, everybody was like, I just want you to know, like, you were the first female sportscaster we had. And I was like, okay, cool. At that moment, I didn't really care for it, but it was kind of cool to realize that, like, I was one of the first people to do that, and that in a super male dominated field, like, there's still a lot of firsts that you can break through. And you see now, like, there's a whole lot more Black women in the space, but like, that was really cool for me to do that there. So that's kind of like my field in a nutshell. I still work in sports media. I'm an SID right now. It's a strenuous job, but I'm also on maternity leave. So it's great. It's because I don't have to really worry about it right now because we're in the middle of softball season, but it's still super fun. I think state really prepared me for a lot of things. I know we're probably going to talk about the culture and stuff later, but yeah, there's a million and one stories I can tell you about being at state and my experience. And I really love talking about it, and I'll still support, donate, do all of those things. So I'm very active and a very active alum.
That's what's up. So, in a short, to shorten that up, she was a big deal. She went there and she was a big deal. So, nah, that's great stuff, and congratulations on your new addition.
Thanks.
Yeah, just yeah, I think for a lot of us, so it's good to have that background. So you come from Georgia, um, like in your high school was like, what was because I think when a lot of us think about West Virginia State, obviously we think about the fact that it is the population is majority white. What was your high school like, or what was your school experience up to that? Because I know some students, they grow up in an all Black atmosphere, and some people, it's a little bit more diverse. I know with me, it was kind of like my high school was probably kind of like West Virginia State. To be honest, it probably wouldn't have been that much of a difference for me. But I'm curious as for you, and what the and just what it was like once you kind of, I guess, you knew, going in the makeup of the school.
Yeah. So that was something I think I always got that question being a tour guide and working in admissions. It was like, why is it so white? And it was like, I'm not gonna lie, I said the same thing, but in high school, I won't even say high school, like from elementary school to middle school, and then like switching over to like I moved. So like elementary and middle school was kind of like mixed. I was exposed to a lot of like different experiences, like even in pre-K. Like I can say that I went to a really, really diverse like pre-K, and then like elementary school was super diverse because I met all different walks of life in that specific area. I want to say Cobb County is like it's Cobb County in Georgia. It used to be super white, but now it's super, mixed. And I mean, Georgia in general is becoming, well, specifically the Metro Atlanta area is very diverse. But then I moved to Cherokee County. Huh?
So a lot of people don't like that.
Oh yeah, it's very that's why I had to get out of there. But it was mixed. And then I went to Cherokee County. Now, Cherokee County is kind of like what Cobb County was when I was younger, but Cherokee County was super white. I went from middle school down to elementary school. So they were K-6. And so I go from being around all these different like kids and learning how to be a middle schooler to going back to elementary school. And it was super white next to a farm. I've seen cows like go across and like do their little thing, have their little time, and then go back over to the little farm because they wouldn't be like really watched for real. Like that's how rural it was. And then my high school was brand new and it was still very white. Like we had literally the black table and that was like all of us. But I was super like, I mixed with every crowd because I was not really, I wouldn't call myself popular. Like I played basketball, but I never really thought that me playing basketball made me like hang out with everybody. I had friends that were in bands, so I was familiar with like the band geeks, quote unquote, but they were always cool to me because we all had similar interests. And then I had friends that were athletes because I was always working with the athletes. Like I was either athletic training or managing or actually like competing. And then I also had my friends that were just like, hey, we're just chilling, we're here, but we'll go to some games, but we're not going to be like in the student section. We might cheer, but like we're not doing all this other stuff. Like, so I was pretty around everybody. So I think that's why I was super involved when I got to state.
So
I
you're
think now,
pretty well prepared, basically.
yeah, I grew up pretty prepared. And then I think like in my mind, my mom, like she always put in my head, like, look at HBCUs, but even my mom was like, what is West Virginia State? Like she went to Howard. She eventually went to state. She got her degree there. So we're both alums from there. So that's pretty cool. We can talk about that later. But like, yeah, she was like, what is that? I've never heard of that in my life. Like, I don't think I ever heard of it either. And I remember checking the website when I like we were getting ready to go visit the school. I'm like, why is the football team so white? Like, I'm asking all these questions because I'm like, I don't know. And it was like, it may be an ignorant way of thinking, but come to find out, like all of these kids are like super well versed in like where they're going to school. They know what they signed up for, and a lot of those kids, they realize like West Virginia is not just white there. It's state. It's like white, very white everywhere. So like these kids are meeting Black people for the first time, some of them, and they're becoming like best friends. And so like to me, I was kind of prepared. I know other people might not be, but then come to find out like these are like your best friends for life. They always come back for homecoming. I think that's like the biggest thing is they always come back. A lot of them are still donating. They'll still donate and support in their own special way. They donate to the things that they care about. Some kids have different experiences. I feel like that's everywhere at every school. But I think that it's jarring to see at your first glance, but is to me, I enjoyed it, and that's probably because I was super involved. It's also rural, so I was also prepared for that too. So it being in the middle of nowhere, it's like literally 15 minutes from the city. It's not the biggest city in the world. It's like town size compared to Georgia or like Birmingham or wherever, but it's still a city, and there's still stuff to do. Like you might have to drive, but it's fine. Like you are supposed to go to school to experience the things that you weren't able to do before. So like if you never taken public transportation, congratulations, honey. You better get on this bus and do that, because that was like probably one of the first things that I did when I got there. I was like, I've never rode like on a bus before. I'm gonna have to do that. So I had learned how to do that. Took the bus. This is like before Uber popped off. So like all of these experiences, I feel like I wouldn't have learned if I didn't go there. So it was a jarring thing at first, like I said, but I got used to it, and then I eventually like branched out and learned a whole bunch of stuff. It was super fun, and then like the demographic thing was like the last thing on my mind because I felt like I was really helping the school in the long run.
Yeah. Again, we're talking with Baigen Seawell. She is a graduate of West Virginia State University. And so, we're talking about West Virginia State University, along with its. Are they your? Do you guys consider them your rival, Bluefield State University?
Yeah, I mean, I think now it's becoming more because Bluefield, like, I'm not gonna lie, I give Bluefield their props because they came and hit the ground running. Like their content, and this is coming from like my sport media / like creative perspective. Their content is blown out of the water. Like they literally came and hit the ground running since they joined the CIAA. I've been advocating for us to rejoin the CIAA for years, but I think it's a travel thing. And I think that's just like the inconveniences. We would be the most far out of like the schools because we're like closer to Kentucky than it is Virginia, Maryland, and all these other places. So I think that's part of the reason why we're still in the Mountain East Conference. I mean, we've clearly done well with where we are. There's a lot of ranked teams that are in the Mountain East, but gosh, I just in my own mind, we are like Bluefield's rivals. I think we've beaten them every single time we played them, but like, gosh, I always thought of them as our rival, and I'm sure like in the past it's probably been more heated than it is, but yeah, I think now that they're starting to like ramp up, they're starting to get some attention too. I think it's gonna revive it. Our real rival is University of Charleston because it's up the street, but I think a true like HBCU rival, I think it would be Bluefield, and I'm sure it was that in the past before I was there. We just got back to starting to like play them consistently, so we'll see how it goes in the long run. Though I'm excited to see how that goes. I just
Yeah,
want us to join the CIAA though.
you said what?
I would love for us to rejoin the CIAA though. Yeah.
Yeah, well, yeah, I think if some things keep going away, certain schools that there may be an opening, but unfortunately, but yeah, that was going to be one of my questions too. I was going to ask you uh,
Hmm.
about this the CIAA thing because again, so I've done the research like you have too. So Bluefield State and West Virginia State were both in the CIAA in the 30s, 40s, and in the 50s, and then. I believe this decision came from the powers that be in West Virginia that they joined West Virginia Centric Conference, and that was also around the time that their demographics were changing rapidly. The black people that were in West Virginia were beginning to move out of West Virginia, and I know Bluefield State has the story of their the bomb that went off in 1968 that really ended up impacting their school, getting students off campus, and really it's where it really became majority predominantly white. Is there any history background like that there at West Virginia State, or just for people who may not know that for you guys?
Yeah. So from my own like research and understanding, I think state has been very much so like black for a long time. But I think like when integration hit, it was kind of that thing where, okay, WVU is here. University of Charleston is a super private school that is expensive, and Marshall is out the way. And at the time, like I highly doubt that they had like the branch schools that they have now. Like Marshall has a South Charleston campus that is like up the street from State, and the private, or not, I won't say private schools, but the community colleges that were in the area. I really don't think that they were around like just yet. So those weren't really options, and so with integration, it made it easier for not just black people to go to WVU if they want to now. Like now you have white people that are like, okay, I can go to state now and it's more affordable and it makes sense. It is right there because we're kind of in an area where state is, well, state, I'm saying like the Canal River, which is the river that's literally right behind our stadium and it runs behind our campus. That was like a mode of transportation. Like people would go up and down to like get people to basically go there, behind the railroads and everything like that. So they would use that to like navigate and everything. And so that's how they would tell people about the school and then they would come. And then outside of that, when, it made it easier to transport or to move around and stuff like that, you got more and more people coming. So there was like a large, like I said, black population. And then once I think integration hit, it made it more easy for people to just, okay, I'm just going to go here. And that's why I think like, I want to say like a couple years back, I think one of like the first like white cheerleaders that we had when he had passed away,
I
like
want to say like a couple years back,
it was like I want to say it was
cheerleaders that we had when
it was around 3 years ago. But yeah, he passed away and it was like, I won't say it was a huge deal, but people remember like, oh yeah, that was like one of the like first white cheerleaders. I want to say he came in like the 60s. So yeah, it was one of those things where I think integration kept the school open too, because I feel like it was probably the same thing with Bluefield where, okay, now these people can go to Charleston, they can go to WVU, Marshall, but now like you have options. Um, so they left, and then you have other people coming in, and you don't have to stay in West Virginia if you don't want to. That's why a lot of kids that go there they leave. But I mean, I think with some of them coming in, it keeps like the schools open, and then like on top of that, we have our online programs and everything like that. So I really feel like that's where a lot of schools are like, or a lot of schools have ended up resorting to like these other students who might be interested in the school, and then they do that. And I think that also helps with recruiting too, because a lot of kids, they might not know about the school, but that was one thing that I always emphasize. I'm like, if you're coming here, you're gonna know the history, you're gonna know what you're doing, you're gonna know like what you're getting into. But I think it still goes back to the alums that are not black. They definitely know uh, what they're getting into, especially if they came while I was there, because I'm like, that was one of my biggest things when I was in SGA for the students to know. So yeah, it's kind of weird, but the integration thing, I think it was like reverse. You get an influx of, white students, and then you have black students who don't want to stay in West Virginia that leave, or they don't have interest because it's like it's right up the street. So it's one of those things where that happened, but I think the school still being open is a really good thing. I think one of the things that we probably will have to improve on is like emphasizing and keeping that history, like, and the traditions consistent, so it doesn't get lost in translation, because when you have that many people, it can get lost in translation. But so far it's been pretty consistent with that. Like, people are still supportive and they still very much don't know what they're getting into when they get there.
Okay, good stuff there. So, and then we'll get on to the sports in just a second. I don't want to
Yeah.
keep it too long, but you talk about, now, there's been a resurgence in, well, I don't want to say resurgence, but now that we have social media and the internet, there's a lot more discussion about HBCUs, even more so than when I started HBCU Game Day back in 2012. And it's great in one sense, but also can be very cliquish. It can be very it can sometimes you can go from going back and forth to getting nasty with folks.
Yeah.
Like let's just keep it a buck. Again, for everybody, if you're watching on YouTube, please remember to like the stream. But let's keep it a buck and get a little nasty sometimes. And when you see and hear HBCU discussions as an alumna of West Virginia State University, which is one of the two HBCUs that is predominantly white, like how do you feel, just as, coming from that perspective, that you feel like you guys are shut out of the conversation or ignored, or, just kind of what's that like? Because I'm curious.
Yeah, I want to say, when I was like still in school, like we had, like I remember, and it probably still is a thing, I don't know, but we had like this huge HBCU group chat, and I remember joining, and I remember everyone was like, "What is West Virginia State?" And I'm like, "It's an HBCU. That's why I'm here." And I remember like there was one, I think, interaction that I still think about to this day. I think one of the girls that I was talking to, she was like, "Well, it's very white on your website. Like, there's a whole bunch of white people on there. I don't understand like how you want to claim that that's an HBCU." I was like, well, if you look at the textbook definition of what it is, according to the Department of Education, it's any school that was founded before integration. So let's start there. One, two, there's like a whole bunch of people that have come from this school that have done things then and now, that you might not really think, oh yeah, it's not like huge or whatever. It might not be like on a national or international scale, but it's still done. And I think the other thing is like I feel like a lot of people again lose the plot, because it's like we are so, like you said, it's cliquish, but we're like so gung ho on our own schools that like you got to be able to support the other ones in order for all of us to grow. That's kind of how I've always looked at it, and that's why I've always supported every and all schools. I think another experience, I think every single time for the HBCU 5K in Atlanta, our alumni chapter always like got the most money, as far as donations and like support. So like we would always generate the most money every single year for a while. um so that always like, for some whatever reason, it's not that I don't think people realize it. I think it's just like people aren't thinking about the smaller schools, because there's not just like a West Virginia State. You have like these very small schools in Alabama, because that's where I live now. There's super small schools in Alabama. Like I remember hearing about, who was it? I want to say it was Oakwood. And I remember somebody was like, "What's in Oakwood?" And I was like, "Don't do that, because there's people that go here, and these people like support their school like through and through." Or like Talladega, super small, but they're really good at basketball. They've always gone to the NAIA tournaments, and they just went like a couple years ago. So, and I think the last team to go to an NAIA tournament was West Virginia State, and that was like in the '80s. So it's like you guys kind of have to like know your history, but also like respect the schools that are here, because if every single school had that energy, I feel like it would be a little more respectful. But again, I think it's no different than like how PWI is like they really go in on each other. Like SEC schools are freaking insane. Like they are literally like foaming at the mouth for their schools. And I feel like to some extent we kind of do the same thing for our own schools. Like we're really like go hard for our schools and we kind of forget the other ones. But I pretty much do that same thing. I always like to educate people because that's always what I've been doing. Like I said when I was earlier, when I would argue with guys about sports, it's the same thing. So I always like try and approach it in a respectful manner. But if we want to get disrespectful, we can. But I usually don't go that route because I know like it's coming from a place of just not knowing, and it's better to just know than to be disrespectful about it. I mean, I don't really take it personally. I do feel like we can sometimes get lost, in talking about it, which is why I like to bring it up and always talk about it. I think it's better to continue to talk about it for people to know than to not talk about it at all. So it doesn't bother me anymore. Like I will talk in the void if I have to about my school. But I feel like me and all my friends, like we are all supportive of our schools. And like I feel like with time, especially since we're becoming like the older young alumni, like I think we're getting to that point where like now is our chance to step up. It's our chance to step up and everything. I think that that's like, one of the things that we have to do. So advocating is huge for me, but it doesn't bother me anymore. I won't say that. I just, like I said, I just educate where I can. That's all I can do.
I got you. Yeah. So now that we talked about the culture and all of that stuff, is great. Appreciate everybody for tuning in. If you have any questions, if you're on YouTube, please make sure to drop that super chat, and we'll definitely make sure that we get it up and talk there. But we'll also talk. I have a question about. So we'll talk about basketball because that's a big reason why we're here.
Oh,
So first off, both of your teams are in the NCAA tournament.
Yes.
But let's start at the let's talk about that. Let's break that down. So the start of the season. For men's basketball, you guys hosted the Earl Lloyd Classic.
Yes.
And first on your menu were the defending champions of the CIAA, Winston-Salem State University, just happens to be my alma mater.
Yeah.
And, very good, very heated game. I do recall that I think WS said she was winning, and the stream went out. And then
yes. Oh my gosh.
And then all of a sudden, I come out and West Virginia State has a 7-point win, and I'm like, anyway, I knew, because I remember seeing you tweeted about it, because I think you're really probably the only West Virginia state person that I follow or that comes up on my feed. So I remember you were tweeting about it, I knew that loss was going to come back and bite us in the ass. And it most certainly did. You guys went 20-9, and got an at-large bid, number 7 seed in the Atlantic region. Winston went 19-9, and did not get in. Now, of course, there's a whole nother reason we lost to not only, man, this is tough. I didn't even think about this, man. We lost not only to y'all, y'all a respectable program, obviously. We also lost to Bluefields. It started the season with a loss to West Virginia State, and we ended the season with a loss to Bluefield State. Man, I'm gonna have to talk to Cleo about that. But anyway, when you guys do get a chance to match up against other HBCUs, is that something that you pay a little bit more attention to it? Obviously, you pay attention to West Virginia State sports regardless, but is that something that you kind of, for you, that you may pay attention a little bit more? What's that like?
Oh yeah, I definitely pay attention more because I feel like. And I talked to the athletic director, Nate, if you're watching this, that I'm in your DMs all the time telling you what we can do to get better all the time. I give him my unsolicited free consultations at all times, but not joking aside, I should say. Especially when we play for the Earl Lloyd Classic, because at first when I was there, when I was still there, like 2015 to 2019, Earl Lloyd Classic was primarily the schools in West Virginia. It was never really that many HBCUs, and now it's starting to trickle the other way. Outside of that, kind of backtracking, well, not backtracking, but sidebar. For football, we would usually play PWIs a lot. We still do. We would play the teams in our conference, but I remember a couple times we played Kentucky State and we would dog walk them. I'm so sorry if you're in a Kentucky State alum, because it was 72 to something one time. I swear it was like a basketball score. It was bad, but when they would come, it would be it would be a different vibe because you would have alums coming to those games. And so I think the Earl Lloyd Classic specifically, I always like really wanted us to play HBCUs. And when we did, I think it was a little bit sweeter because it's like, okay, there's history behind this. Like, let me look at like the record books. Let me see like last time we played them, what was the score? All this other like information that needed to be known. So I definitely watch those a little harder because it's like it's important. Those are the times that we interact with them, and then that might be a chance that we play them again. Like it might very well be that we have, Winston Salem come back, Bluefield come back. Obviously, they're closer.
Nah, man, y'all gotta come to games. Y'all
Hey,
gotta like if you're 80 years on here, y'all gotta come to games. Like
yeah, yeah,
the Mount East and PSAC teams, they don't really like to come down to the CIAA
yeah,
because they already, that was part of my discussion. Now y'all gotta come to CE games. Y'all gotta come for the Cleo Hill Invitational. I'm giving my AD Thomas on the line. We gotta make that happen. It can't be the one track thing.
yeah, yeah.
Games is different.
I
So I'm
agree.
sure you've seen the videos and everything. But no, I think that's great. I know Shaw participated in the one this year. Shaw actually beat you
Mhm.
guys. Who?
Yeah, that was I was sick because
It was,
it was looking good until it wasn't. So
yeah,
yeah.
look, when people beat the Rams, they get a little excited, and the next game, the next night, I don't know.
Yeah, it was rough. And I feel like when we when the men lose, I don't know, it hits a little harder. I'm always like when the women lose, it's like, okay, I can deal with this. Like we'll bounce back because we are usually like, especially with our new coach, Charles Marshall. Charles Marshall is like the greatest coach that I've ever seen. Like he's literally taken that team and built them up with what he's had and then getting like what he needs to improve it. And he's always like continuously like improved every single year. Like last year they were ranked, this year they were ranked. At first they were ranked, it was getting a little shaky, and then they got back into the rankings again. And the Atlantic region is not easy
Yeah.
for either. So I think to even be ranked right now, regardless if you're 9 or whatever, like that was fine. And then like the men also beat a ranked opponent right before the actual tournament started. So yeah, I do think that we do need to like, actually travel more. But I think again that goes with we have to schedule these like games a whole lot more. I think basketball is like more of what people come out to. Football, people go because it's football. But basketball is like what people really show up and show out for because basketball programs have always been super successful. And then outside of that, like knowing people who are on the basketball team that have done a whole lot of good things, men's and women's, like it's always fun to see. I know one of a couple of my pro fights, they played on the 2004 squad that went to nationals, and that was like, that was a while ago, but like them telling me the stories of how it went and like the experiences they had, it was definitely interesting to me. So like outside of that, like you just have to be aware and then also schedule these things and make sure that you're available for them and go to them and travel. I think that was one thing I did do because you do not want to be in West Virginia for too long. Like you just got to travel. And that's how I got to like know a lot of people from a whole lot of different schools, from WVU to Kentucky State to Central State. We would play Central State for other sports too. So it was like you just gotta get out there, get to know some people, acquaint yourself with other schools. I think that's one of the things that a lot of schools can do with us, and then us to them, vice versa. So I think that's one thing that I aim to do every year is try and go to a school, get to know some people, let them know about my own school. Just be the propaganda person that I am when it comes to state. So yeah.
Gotcha. I definitely appreciate your time. As you said, both your men's and women's programs are there. It would be great for you guys to be in the CIAA for a lot of reasons, but being in that Mountain East, it does have some advantages. It's it's interesting. It's interesting. Your women's team got in as well. They got an at-large bid. And a lot of people were looking at Virginia State.
Mhm.
Nationally ranked. I think they were 23-5. They didn't get in. And traditionally, CIAA women's basketball has been very good. I mean, they have
Mhm.
multiple national champions. Teams that have gone to the national championship game. But I guess, do you think it's an advantage for you guys being in the Mountain East if you're comparable to a CIAA team, like in your opinion?
Yeah, I mean, I enjoy being in the Mountain East, but I feel like scheduling out. I mean, there's clearly like a whole lot of like good teams outside of the Mountain East. I mean, there's a lot of teams that get ranked. Like usually it's like it'll usually be the typical ones like Glenville. We beat Glenville last year. Glenville was a very good team at the time. We beat them basically like it was a game of free throws. And so that was a huge advantage because it got us, in there like for the tournament. But like I think still scheduling like these other teams that battle test you, like I'm a huge advocate for that. And like even working where I work now, like all of my coaches, they will, specifically in softball, our coach will definitely like schedule those games. Like, why are we playing these power fives like 5 times in a row? Because at the end of the season, we'll obviously be good enough to, possibly get a chance to play in the, Women's College World Series. That's the end goal. But I think that is one of the things that, from outside looking in, being battle tested more, traveling more, being prepared for that. I know it's like a lot, especially like on the budgeting and on the scheduling and things like that. But having like one or two of those games does not hurt. And I think that's one of those things that, in the non-conference slots, if we can travel down to North Carolina and play a couple of games, like that's perfect. I think that would be great because there, like you said, there are really, really good teams, even in Virginia. Like you don't have to go far, but like playing these teams helps a lot. But I definitely understand the frustration, like when you have a really good record, but just based off of your strength of schedule and the conference that you're in, or the teams that you've played, it might not be good enough because they're also looking at, what are the rankings of these other teams? What are you doing? Or what is like the stats? What are the stats looking like? How are you performing? All of these things that go into it. I get it. So I definitely wish there were more HBCUs that were in there because there are great teams. I feel like D2 won't be like how it is with D1 with how they'll extend it or open it up more, but I would love to see that. And that's another thing too. Like I'm a huge advocate for like the smaller schools because I didn't go to a big school, so I
Right.
want those same amenities and those same things that they give for the D1s to give to the D2, especially working at a D1 school. Like I want to be able to see the same things that y'all are doing here for the smaller schools, give that same energy. So hopefully one day it will be big enough to where we can have more schools in there because I feel like a lot more HBCUs would be in the tournament if we had more availability for it.
Gotcha. Well, I really appreciate you for hopping on today. I know I don't want to take up too much of your time, but I definitely appreciate you for hopping on and explaining to us a little bit about the culture at West Virginia State University and talk a little bit about the athletics as well. So hopefully we'll have a chance to have you on again sometime soon. But just before we get out, is there anything if people want to follow you or your work or anything you want to plug, feel free.
Yeah, I mean, I work in sports media, but I also just do sports media related things in general. You can follow me on the Twitter if you want. It's at Precious Color. But you can definitely like if I ever put any work out, it's always usually on my Precious Media page. Like I said, I do a whole bunch of different things, but the biggest thing is, if you really want to follow somebody, follow WVSU Athletics. That would be great. Don't worry about me because I'm gonna always talk about my school. It's always gonna be biased in nature, but definitely follow like our page, follow our athletics. We're doing really big things, especially in track. It's track season right now, and I feel like we're probably gonna be one of those schools to look out for at the D2 level since we just got it back. But if anything, follow our athletics pages. And if Javier is watching, he's my biggest hater. He was laughing at me. I was like, dude, I'm trying to put our school on. But yeah, that's really all I have. In Go State, that's literally the biggest thing. You don't have to follow me. I'm literally a loose cannon, so I would advise you not to follow me.
Hey, rule number one is know thyself. So,
Yeah.
yeah, no doubt. Well, I appreciate you for coming on. Yeah, you got to get in your 80s here, man. We got to get that return trip down to North Carolina to come to see E Game Center. To trade those out. So, appreciate you so much for hopping on, and we will talk again soon.
Absolutely. Thank you for having me.
Appreciate you. All right. So that was Baigen Seawell. She is a proud graduate of West Virginia State University, who is in both the men's and women's Division II NCAA basketball tournament which will be tipping off on Friday, I believe. So please make sure that you go check that out. They are one of the HBCUs that we do have there competing, as well as on the women's side we have Miles College, and we have Fayetteville State, the champions there. And then on the men's side, in addition to West Virginia State, we also have CIAA champion Lincoln University. We have SIC champion Clark Atlanta, and we have an at-large bid for Miles College, who will be facing the defending national champions. National champions Nova Southeastern. It'd be Cyrus. Yeah, I just realized that as we were on here, like, lost to both. Though. Anyway, we go on. So it is conference tournament time in the MEAC and SWAC. So yesterday things got started off with a bang. So a part of Tally is down in Birmingham doing some broadcast work for the SWAC. I know somebody put out an APB for him yesterday when they put his picture under the photo of a young lady, but no, he is there. He is alive and well in the flesh, and he's calling the men's games down there in the SWAC. So shout out to them for getting an announcer who knows, who follows these teams and knows can really talk about the game and what these players' games are like. Because I think it's very important in these conference tournaments. So their tournament got off to a bang. First off, we had the first major upset of the day. We had Alcorn State, who came in as number 2 in the SWAC. They were facing Alabama A&M, but the tournament's in Birmingham. Not quite the backyard of, maybe it's the backyard. I don't know. You guys can tell me if you're from Alabama, if you feel like Birmingham is the backyard of Huntsville. But anyway, a major upset there as Alcorn State University goes down, which means Alabama A&M will advance to the semifinal round. So big shout out to them. I'm sure they're very excited. Tournament time is like that, hey, what you did in the regular season doesn't really matter if you can't get it done in March or, February 28th, So anyway, big shout out to Alabama A&M as they continue to go on. On the men's side, we did have Grambling State surviving a challenge from an Alabama State squad, and Grambling State is the number 1 team in the SWAC for the men. We did have them surviving that. I think it was a 6-point win for Grambling State, who had just lost to Alabama State a couple of days prior. So I'm sure they were happy to get that win. Interesting stat that's come up over the last couple of years is that Grambling State has never been to the NCAA tournament. They did go to the NAIA back in 1961, I believe it was, when they had Willis Reed. Shout out to Cap, RIP. But yeah, they've never been to the NCAA tournament, so that's pretty incredible. And in a couple of days, maybe that will no longer be a stat. Maybe that'll be a thing of the past. But for right now, that's what it is. On the women's side, we had Florida A&M. Happy to be there. But they were trounced out of the postseason there. Solid season for them to make it to the SWAC tournament for the first time ever. They joined the SWAC in 2021, and in the SWAC tournament, you have to be a top 8 team to get there. So loss for them. And then you look over at Jackson State, they come in as the overwhelming favorite, and they took care of business against Prairie View A&M. I think it was a 9-point win for them. So, to Tamika Reed and her crew took care of business there. So that was day 1 over in the SWAC. Now here in Norfolk, where I am at the MEAC, first off, we started the day off with Norfolk State doing Norfolk State things against South Carolina State. It wasn't a 62-point win like the last time, but it was a solid 32-point win. If you were doing a spread, I don't know, maybe South Carolina State beat the spread. But in general, Norfolk State moves on. Howard University faced a stiff task from Morgan State, depending on who you ask, is a rival of theirs, but if you ask Morgan State, a lot of people will say that they're rivals, but if you ask somebody from Howard, it seems like they're probably going to tell you that they're not rivals. So, but anyway, a tightly contested game. And just so happens those two happen to be matching up tonight on the men's side as well. So we'll get even more of that little Beltway non-rivalry thing. I don't know. Let me know in the comments what you think. If you're a Howard or a Morgan State alumnus, are those two rivals? Our good friend Erica Lee of HBCU Nightly loves to say that they are not, while her comrade in arms, Mr. Banks, likes to say that they are. And he thoroughly believes that and fervently believes that. And when the game was over with, there was a tweet with an eviction of a bear, a violent eviction of a bear from Miss Lee. So, always good to have that type of discussion around our HBCU athletics. So Norfolk State and Howard University women both advanced to the semifinal round. On the men's side, Norfolk State came in as well, number one, taking on a Coppin State team that was 2-8 and 2-28 overall. I was up here just a week ago, and I saw Norfolk State win the championship. And head coach Coach Robert Jones was saying how that they had the biggest trap game of the tournament because they were playing a 2-win team, but a team that had played them twice and tight. And early on in the game, it looked like it could be a trap game because Coppin State was able to really get some things going early on and put some pressure on Norfolk State. But Norfolk State regained form, bounced back. The player of the year, Jamari Thomas, newly minted player of the year, Jamari Thomas, which I went out on a limb. Well, not even really out on a limb. I thought he deserved the award. And he did not have his best game. He leads the conference in scoring at 17 plus points a game. And he's their leading assist guy. He didn't have a great night last night, but I'll tell you who did have a great night. That was Mr. Christian Ings. He is AKA Philly, which we've learned. That's his nickname. And, he's a guy who plays with a lot of intensity, plays with a lot of excitement. And, he was able to put up 17 last night, hit 4 out of his 6 3-pointers. Coach Rob Jones says he's not really one of the 3-point shooters, but he can make a 3, and he made 4 of them last night. So he carried that team as they were able to get a sizable victory after an early push from Coppin State to end the first year of head coach Larry Stewart. So there was that game, and then the nightcap of the game. The nightcap was the nightcap of that game was the North Carolina Central versus Maryland Eastern Shore matchup. So with this game, this was a 2-7 matchup. North Carolina Central, it's been a while since they won a championship, but head coach Lavelle Moten has a lot of championship and MEAC tournament experience. He was going up against Jason Crafton and his guys who, really came on last year. They've had a little bit of a struggle this year, but at the end of the day, it was a good battle, a really good battle. Early on, they came out and really did their thing. Maryland Eastern Shore shot 50% from the game for the game, and it was definitely a highly contested game, and it got even down to the last couple of minutes where it was a 2-point game. But North Carolina Central was able to connect on its free throws and handle things, and so they got the win. And it was a solid day one at the MEAC. Day two is now going on. We got Coppin State taking on Maryland Eastern Shore. That game is going on right now, and it should be wrapping up pretty shortly. I'll try to pull up the score for that in just a little bit. If anybody has it, they can pop it in the chat. But that game is going on right now. And, we've got some other games going on as well. If we go back over to the SWAC, today we have, let's see what we've got going on today. So today we have on the men's side, we got Southern University, and they will be taking on Bethune-Cookman, and that's at 8:30 tonight. So Tolly will be on the call for that. So be sure to check him out there. And the early game that will be starting in just about an hour and a half is going to be Texas Southern versus Jackson State. Of course, Texas Southern every year, every year it seems like they get into the championship. They get into the tournament and find a way to get into the championship game no matter what their record is. They did it last year. Will they be able to do it this year? That remains to be seen. But, in the meantime, until it does, it's always possible until it doesn't happen. So let's see. Let's see where we are on the women's bracket. We have Southern versus Alcorn State. That game should have actually already wrapped up today. That was an 11 a.m. game. I'm sorry, so which would have made it 12 here. So that should be wrapping up as well. So if anybody has that score, please put it in the chat. I'll be sure to pull it up. But we also have at 5:30, we've got Arkansas Pine Bluff, who at one time looked like they were a challenger to Jackson State, a legit challenger. And then they had some challenges and issues of their own, an ugly fight. Let's just call it what it is. Everybody's seen it, an ugly fight between the teams. And they have kind of been spiraling since then. And they're taking on Alabama A&M, who, of course, we said that their men got the win yesterday. Will their women, as that 4 or 5 seed match can often go either way. So it's definitely it is definitely going to be interesting to see who advances there. And then on the other side at the in the MEAC, let's see where we are with our tournament bracket, which if you guys did not see earlier in the week, we also did post the news that the MEAC tournament is going to be expanded over to, not expanded. It's actually going to be staying in Norfolk for the near future. A lot of people have been through 2027, a lot of people have been, asking or hoping that it would leave here in Norfolk. And I have to say, having been to almost every tournament in Norfolk, I never really thought it would leave, at least not anytime soon. I just don't see a good reason for it to leave at this point. And I know the temptation is, and I see a lot of people in the MEAC and the SWAC, looking at the tournament as this potential huge moneymaker. And maybe that's the case. I mean, we obviously see the CIAA tournament, what they have with Baltimore. I think a lot of people have seen that, and they look at that as something that's close to ideal. Having a partnership with the city where the city is pouring back in and bringing in the scholarship funds for students, which is a great thing. But, the CIAA tournament is kind of its own animal, kind of its own beast. It really is the granddaddy of them, even though I think the SIC tournament may be older. It's a different animal. It's a different thing. And that's partly due to tradition, partly due to culture, and partly due to the fact that, these schools are in Division II. And so this is their opportunity to really make money in sports, or really get some of the payback in sports. But if you're at the Division I level, your money maker is going to be the NCAA tournament, right? It's the money that you get that's dispersed from the NCAA tournament, which continues to go up, and as long as you have, so that automatic bid that they have is there. So for the conferences, the MEAC and the SWAC, traditionally they've always looked at their conferences as conference tournaments as a means to an end, where it's not the end, it's not the journey. It's just, okay, we got to declare a champion. We're doing the tournament format. We need to make sure that we are, we just need to have a tournament. We need to let everybody be there and determine a champion so that we can send them to the NCAA so that they can make the real money for us, which is there. So, it's a different animal, different ball game. I know a lot of people wanted the MEAC to, potentially, make that move, move elsewhere. But, for right now, it is where it is. And Right now it is where it is, and city of Norfolk is it's not okay. And there's no disrespect. I'm here right now, so it's not the sexiest city in the world, right? But it's not necessarily a tourist destination, especially at this point of the year. But it is the home of the MEAC. The MEAC has been here now since I believe the 1990s, or I'm sorry, the 2000s. So it's the home of the MEAC. They have a good, seem to have a good relationship. The city with the MEAC itself, Commissioner Sonia Steele and her folks, they work well together. And I think that again, for them, it's a means to an end. And also the big thing about that Norfolk has in its favor is that it has the biggest, most fervent fan base in the MEAC when it comes to basketball, and that's Norfolk State University. Norfolk State, as traditionally, going back to its days in the CIAA, been a basketball school. A lot of success on the basketball court. Football field is a whole nother story, but basketball, they really get behind here. And last night, was just an example why Norfolk State had the 6 p.m. game on a Wednesday night, and it looked like an early homecoming party for season homecoming party, but a homecoming party for Norfolk State University, outside the scope, inside the scope in terms of the stands and also the concourse as well. I'll drop some videos on those a little bit later, but definitely, that Norfolk State fan base, if Norfolk State plays, and especially if they play an evening game, you're guaranteed a good crowd. You're guaranteed one of your better crowds. And when they're not there, you can see the difference. So, obviously a lot of people talked about potentially Baltimore. People have potentially talked about Maryland, DC as well. And obviously, you have schools that are there, but Norfolk State, they have that. They also have fan bases that, they haven't, the size arena that they would have to have. They haven't really shown that. So, if Howard is in there, or if Morgan State is in there and they get knocked out, what's going to be, what's going to be the difference? So a lot of discussion there, but Norfolk rolls out the red carpet for the MEAC. It's been good to the MEAC. If you look at the MEAC's history, it's been nomadic and not nomadic in the terms that, historically there's a tournament. It's not been nomadic in the terms that, it's been necessarily highly desired. It's kind of had to go from place to place. It's had several times where it's been held on campuses, including being held on Norfolk State's campus, I believe, even when Norfolk State was actually in the CIAA. And it's been, I think they had an affiliate at Palestria one year. It was in Greensboro for a while. It was in Winston-Salem. It was in Raleigh. So it's been a couple of places. And Norfolk has been the most stable place. And I think, initially when they got there, it was central to the conference. Now, of course, things have changed. There's no FAMU. There's no Bethune-Cookman. So it's not quite as central, but it's still not that far. So, a lot of discussion about that. There'll continue to be discussion. You guys can discuss in the comments. Let us know where you think, the MEAC should head when 2027 is up. But, for me, I didn't see this as a potential. I saw this as, this kind of makes sense. So it's official now. I'll look to try to get on with some officials and maybe potentially, Commissioner Stills as well, to talk about the relationship between the city and why it's such a good fit on our platform. But look, man, basketball is going on, and I want to make sure that I get in that number. I want to make sure that I get in that number, so I got to get prepared and head down the road. But we got some basketball action today. Again, we have. I went over. Let's see. We have a couple more games this today, so please make sure you guys check it out. Over on the men's side, we do have Delaware State will be taking on. Don't give me the lie, guys. We've got Howard and Morgan State that's going to be coming up a little bit later, and then we also have Del State and South Carolina State. That's going to be an interesting game. Two teams that weren't highly regarded coming into the season, but they are expected to, they have made some noise, and wouldn't be surprised if they crash the party, especially South Carolina State. Second-year head coach Eric Martin has been doing work. Before I leave, we can also just discuss briefly the Hampton University situation, their head coaching situation. So earlier this week, they released longtime head basketball coach Buck Joyner Jr. He was released after 15 seasons. Well, they parted ways, that commentary. They parted ways after 15 seasons. He had a very successful run while they were in the MEAC. They ended up with three championships, I think, in maybe 8 years with him at the helm, including back-to-back in 2015 and 2016. And they made a decision to move over to the Big South. And, I think it was in their second year in the Big South. They were in the second year in the Big South tournament. They actually made the tournament championship game. Lost to that. That was actually right before the pandemic hit. But it is definitely it's been a rough patch for them since they left the MEAC. After that, they have had losing seasons for 5 years in a row, and Hampton was once probably the HBCU that was probably the best example of what it was close to being a mid-major program. Obviously you think about Steve Murfield, and even after that, Coach Bobby Collins had some success there, and then also Buck Joyner Jr. So they kind of had a formula going in the MEAC, and they have not been able to adapt in this new era where, and a lot of people want to, boil it down to the MEAC, but also there's been the transfer portal. That's a thing as well. The transfer portal has hurt them. They've had a couple of guys who are really talented guys that Buck Joyner was able to bring to Hampton, and they just, they left via the transfer portal. I know one young man ended up going to Texas Tech and being a part of an NCAA team there. Another young man went over to Cincinnati, and I don't think it ever really panned out for him. But, it's tough. It's tough for all of the HBCUs now to keep that talent with the transfer portal and NIL. So, Coach Joyner is on his way out, but it appears, and there are multiple reports, and you guys can go to hbcugameday.com, check out our report on it as well, that Ivan Thomas, who is an assistant at Georgetown, is going to be taking over as the head coach at Hampton University. I think the news about Joyner's firing happened on Monday, and the news that Thomas was going to be the coach began to break on Wednesday, as I was crossing over from the North Carolina to Virginia border. And so it's been a quick process, which lets you know that, they probably have, been eyeing Mr. Thomas for quite a while. You guys can go to hbcugameday.com and check out his resume and the things that he's done. He has most recently been the assistant head coach at Georgetown, the associate head coach at Georgetown, with Ed Cooley, who came in last year. But prior to that, he was with Ed Cooley at Providence. And prior to that, he was a high school coach, and a very good one, a very successful one. He's a Norfolk native, so he's of the soil of the 757. I know a lot of people are always saying that, they should get some more players from locally and they would do better. We'll see how that goes. I'm sure he'll be able to, the thought process is he'll be able to recruit in the Hampton Roads 757, Tidewater, whatever you want to call this area, the 7 cities, that he'll be able to recruit here, because not only was he a high school coach, but he over in Hampton, but he also coached in the North in the Alexandria region as well. But he also coached Boo Williams under 17. And if you know anything about basketball at the grassroots level, AAU, and especially here on the East Coast, you know that Boo Williams under 17 is some of the best players in the country at that age range. And it's always, something to keep an eye on. They're always having guys that are going to play, college basketball on some level, from high majors all the way, to D2s and NAIAs and things like that. So no doubt he has a pulse on the talent that's here in the Tidewater area. Will he be able to pull some of those guys over to Hampton? Historically, that's kind of been, hit or miss. But, it'll definitely be interesting to see if Ivan Thomas, if he indeed is the guy and everything points to him being the guy, what he can do to help Hampton as they continue to make this navigate the CAA landscape. Both Hampton and North Carolina A&T are in the CAA, and both of them have struggled. Again, Hampton had a pretty competent basketball program prior to leaving the MEAC. North Carolina A&T, not quite as much. They were kind of starting to get there a little bit, but some inconsistencies with coaching and challenges there. But Hampton is a program that definitely has been on the map before, and so it'll be interesting to see if Ivan Thomas can get there and hit the ground running. He's teamed up with AD Anthony Henderson, who is a Hampton alumnus himself. And so, this is his guy, his hire. And so, now he'll see if he can reimagine Hampton University basketball in the 2020s as he assumes a role there. So I appreciate everybody for hopping on today. Again, I'm going to go get ready to get up and go check out the Hampton University. No, not Hampton University. Hampton is no longer in the MEAC, even though somebody might want to tell the people that are doing the sign over the light signs over there. Shout out to the news reporter from the Virginia Pilot, Michael Sauls, who captured that. They still got some of the logos from schools that are no longer with us. But I'll be going over to the MEAC tournament to see the teams that are still currently in the MEAC play tonight. So if you guys can, make sure you catch some HBCU basketball. If it's in person, great. And if not, make sure you are, going to the appropriate places to watch them. Appreciate everybody for tuning in. You guys have a great one, and we will talk again soon. Peace.